The learning perspective says that we develop through our learning experiences, that we learn behaviors. Pavlov was one of the first to do some work in this for this theory. Pavlov worked with the dog and got the dog to learn to salivate to the sound of a bell after multiple pairings of the dog food to the bell. So showed up with the dog food and the bell at the same time. And after a while, after many pairings of the dog food and the bell, the dog learned to salivate to the sound of the bell. And Watson did work with learning emotion. So here's little Albert, and here's a rat being presented to him. He has no problem with it at first at all. And after many pairings, though, with this rat, with this horrible loud noise that would make the baby cry, little Albert learned to fear this rat because he associated this rat with this loud noise. So little Albert learned fear, so learned emotions. And then Skinner did more work with operant conditioning. So Pavlov and Watson had the classical conditioning, whereas Skinner was more about the operant conditioning, all about learning behaviors through rewards and punishments. So behaviors that are followed with something positive, a reward, are more likely to happen again, whereas behaviors that are followed by a punishment, something negative, they're less likely to happen. So Skinner did all sorts of experiments with putting animals in the Skinner's box, and these animals learned to push certain levers to get treats and learned to not push other levers because they did not want to get a shock. So that's learning through rewards and punishments. Then you have observational learning, or sometimes it's called social learning perspective, and Bandera did some work with this. They set up an experiment where there was this Bobo doll, this blow-up doll, and sent in some adults into the room with this Bobo doll, and the kids, a certain group of kids, they were watching as the adults beat on this Bobo doll. And the kids that watched the adults beating on this Bobo doll then went into the room and did the same exact thing. Started throwing the Bobo doll around, started bang, 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 banging on it. So that is learning through observation, learning these behaviors by watching other people doing it and seeing that maybe it's fun, that it's okay, and then they themselves do it. So the ways that I remember these different people and what they had to offer is Pavlov, I think, here Pavy, like you're calling the dog, all right? So Pavlov, remember calling the dog, here Pavy, and the dog comes over and you have that bell and you start salivating to the sound of the bell. Then you have Watson. So the way that I remember that is, what? You're not going to do that to my son. So I can't believe that they made this poor little Albert, this little baby, start crying and learn to fear the rat. So every time I see Watson's name, I think, what? You're not going to do that to my son. So learning emotions, learning to be sad. Then you have Skinner, and the way that I remember Skinner is that I think, okay, a punishment that maybe the rat could get for hitting the wrong lever would be to get skinned alive. So it's a horrible thought, but it'll help you to remember. Skinner did these different experiments with rewards and punishment. Maybe a punishment would be for one of these animals to get skinned alive. And then you have Bandura, and he did the experiment with the Bobo doll. So whenever I look at Bandura, I think bang, 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 B-N-D. Imagine it saying bang, so banging the Bobo doll. And then to remember operant and classical conditioning. Operant conditioning, I look at the word operant, I see the word rant there, and I think about how my parents would go off on this huge rant whenever I would do something wrong. They would talk to me about how I let them down and what are the consequences and such. And so this parent ranting on and on was a horrible punishment. So every time I see the word operant conditioning, I think of the rant and how it was such a punishment. All right? And then the classical conditioning is that learning based on associating a previously neutral stimulus to an automatic response, so the bell to salivating, the rat to fear. And then learning through watching other, that's observational. Watson is the little Albert, that's classical conditioning. Bandura, bang bang doll, banging the Bobo doll, observational. Skinner did the different animals, pigeons, rats, that's the operant. And Pavlov, here Pavy, that's classical conditioning, learning instincts.